I was afraid that when everyone's up in the back, I'm like, I hope they come back. So glad to see that you all came back. Thank you for that introduction, Tim, and really excited to be here. We're doing a lot of things at the YWCA, so when I was asked to come talk about sort of what we're doing, sort of what our journey has been to get us where we are today, I was thrilled to share the word. So my goal is to give you some perspective around what we're doing, and then definitely answer any questions that you may have or any feedback that you may have, which is also very important to me. And I'll just say this, my colleague Jill's in the back. There's actually plenty of seats up here. You know no one ever sits in front, so if you want a seat, you're welcome to. She's like, I've heard this story before, I don't need to hear that again. So, well, thank you. So as Tim mentioned, the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago is a 140-year-old social service agency, quite honestly, and so we have been around Chicago for a very long time. Nationally this year, the organization is 160 years old. So we have this big, lofty mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. So we look like we'll be around for a lot longer, but hopefully not another 140 years. But we're proud of the fact that we are one of 200 local associations. So people often ask us, are we affiliated with the YMCA? And the answer is no. Literally 100 plus years ago, when men and women didn't hang out that much together, you had two separate organizations that sort of grew up, and the YWCA has evolved over the years to provide human services, and the YMCA, which most people are more familiar with, continue to do their programming and have their gym models, and they also do some social services as well, but just a different model. And so we're proud that we've been in the Chicago community and really providing deep services for the past 140 years. And so I like to think that we've transformed a lot of lives in the process and continue to do so. So when, as Tim mentioned, I've been at the YWCA for 5 years and I was on the board. I'm a CPA by background, and so I love little charts like this that show like where we've come from. So if you look at this chart, I was on the board in the 2006-ish time frame, and this was what we were experiencing. You don't even need to see the numbers to know that we were just not in a good position. And so we had these significant deficits, and what you see as a net surplus, that really was if we got weren't able, some accounting issue allowed us to actually ended up with more positives than negatives, but it wasn't like we were running a profitable business or a business that was generating any operating surplus. It was really about some accounting entries. And so I came in at 2013, and so that's when, as a board, we decided that we needed to make a change, and so that would be sort of the third from the left the area, and that's when I first came in because we were really atrophying and decided that we needed to really make some changes in the organization, and I decided that I would throw my name in the hat as we were going through this process, because I actually found myself being quite obsessed with what could we do differently at the YWCA. I always knew that our programs and services were so solid, but what I thought was that we really need a different business model. We really need to think about how we do this work in a different way, because clearly, unlike other businesses, if the work's good and your customers are good, you think you'd have a good business, but that wasn't the case. The work was good, our customers were happy with us, if you define the customers as the people we provide services to, but yet we still did not have solid financials. And the reality of what it was that as different funding sources, I heard a little bit of the panel at the end, but as different funding sources were depleted or were not renewed, the programs were just cut. But of course, it takes longer to downsize a program than it does to get new funding to support a program. So it really was a matter of just not having enough resources to really do our work. And so we've been on this sort of incline. I actually asked my CFO with this, once I was looking for the right chart to display our story for this group, I was like, hey, we stopped at 2015. We're like in 2019 now, so we got another story to tell. So I need her to have the rest of this, but really wanted you all to at least get the perspective of where we were coming from and why sort of a different mindset and change was definitely required for us. So as I came in to the organization, I really had to have a new vision around what is it that the YWCA could be and what could we do given where we are today. And so I had this also, I would say, equally as lofty mission that I really wanted to transform this 140-year-old social service agency to a 21st century social enterprise. And so the question is, what does that look like, and how will we accomplish that, and how do we even define social enterprise? Because we are absolutely, from a tax status perspective, a 501c3. So what does that mean for us to be a social enterprise, and how will people react to that? What does that mean given that we have such a deep legacy? One of the first things we had to do, though, as we thought about what this vision of the organization could be, was really look at what our programs and services are. Again, being 140 years old, and given where the financials were, we were kind of a hodgepodge of services. So we were doing something because that's what one funder wanted us to do. We were doing something else because that was another funder wanted us to do. But we really didn't have sort of this idea of why. You know, we talk about theory of change and all of those things as to why nonprofit organizations do what they do and what impact they're trying to have. But for us, when you have such a large, really unbridled mission of eliminating racism, empowering women, it gives you sort of license to do any and everything. But for us, we really had to figure out, what does this mean for us? So what we decided was that we were going to narrow it down to 3 empowerment priorities. So that safety and wellness, education and training, and economic sustainability. And so if you kind of think about it, for us it's almost like this hierarchy of needs, that we needed people to be safe and healthy, receive some type of education, and then to really be able to access economic opportunities. And so that's what we decided that we would have as our core work in our empowerment priorities. One of the things I thought was important as well is that we really tie what we were doing back to what's happening in Chicago. It just felt so strange to me that we had, particularly coming out of the private sector, to see such a thriving marketplace in the city, but yet our organization, given the great work we were doing, we were not thriving. And so we really decided to say that, you know, if we're going to have a strong marketplace, we also need to have strong women within that marketplace, and that's what we really begin to also rally our vision around from an organization perspective. So it's interesting, we had to think about this differently as well, because again, having the legacy that we had, we're like, the world is different today, so what are the other factors that companies are leveraging that we're not necessarily even involved in? So we talked about the new economy. I asked when really after the recession, coming out of the recession, we would hear these terms, the new economy. And we're like, well, actually there's like a new economy, because the factors that held true for the economy even after the recession were still evolving. And so we were looking at, you know, the fact that we were operating in this new world, and our guiding philosophy became that everyone has value in this new world. And the reason everyone has value, because you have disruptive technologies. It's no longer about large organizations. Like, I love this quote, it's attributed to Rupert Murdoch, but he says that the world is changing very fast. Big will not beat small anymore. It's the fast beating the slow. And so we were operating in this new world. So what would these new dynamics mean to our business? So whether it's disruptive technology, crowdsourcing, social media, really not just media, social everything. Everything is beginning to really rely on inputs from multiple sources, as well as this rise of social impact and consumers and employees all wanting to see their companies and the people that they buy from, or the organizations or companies that they buy from, doing good. So all of these things were happening and really allowed us to rethink our business and say, what value can we bring, given that the marketplace conditions as sort of we saw them were really changing, and how can we truly capitalize and create a new business for us, given that we are 140 years old, and what that could mean. So the first thing we had to do is really redefine our business and say, what business are we in? We are absolutely in the business of social services, but then what does that mean for us? And so literally we looked at, you know, as we operate in the new economy, that this business of social service would require new terminology and really new interpretation of what I would consider standard business terms, but what does it mean as we try to operate and figure out what we do as an organization. So the first thing we talk about assets, right? So any business has assets, but we talk about, from a social service perspective, what are our assets? You know, it's interesting, you know, being an accountant, people are like, oh, people are your greatest assets. I'm like, no, they're not on your balance sheet, so no, they're not, right? And so for me, it really is, what are our assets today, given we're in this new economy? And so for us, the relationships, I heard relationships and was one of the key points brought up today on the panel before, but relationships for us is one of our assets. The fact that we work with over 200,000 women and families across the Chicago metropolitan area, that's an asset in today's world. I actually say that we have relationships with our consumers, our customers, the types of relationships that we have, a lot of B2C companies would love to have, but we have those relationships, but we never really saw that type of relationship or interaction as a real asset. You know, we talk about fundraising, which is sort of what we're talking about today, this future of philanthropy as well. Well, we had to change the terminology that fundraising wasn't about, because if you would look at those charts before, you could see that we were raising dollars to operate the business, but we had to reposition fundraising. We talk about fundraising as truly being I call it philanthropic capital. That's the account. You cannot hold that out of me, and so we talk about it as philanthropic capital. But being philanthropic and investing versus fundraising, because I think as we talk about what are the assets in this new world, to really be able to drill down on what fundraising, people get a specific connotation that, you know, we're asking people for money all the time. In some cases, that is what we're doing, but what we like to do is have a different conversation around what those funds are actually doing for the organization, so that we can talk about philanthropy and truly investing in our mission and our organization. Then there's our funders. So we're like, you all are now our strategic business partners, which is also a different conversation. So as you look at what we've done, and I'll talk about this in a minute relative to our revenue, many of our funding relationships are strategic business partners. Corporations are paying us for the work that we're doing that we traditionally would give away because we wanted the world to be a better place, which is still the case. But what I was convincing our team of is that we actually are providing value, and if we weren't doing it, they would actually pay someone else to do it. And the last time I checked, I had to pay you all. And so we created a different conversation with them as well around what we could mean to them as a business, so that we could create what we consider strategic partnerships and really be strategic business partners, given that our business is the business of social services. Then, as we talked about our programs, I mentioned we were doing a lot of different things, and programs are very important to us, but we really started to discuss our programs differently as well, and talk about our programs are really services that are absolutely necessary to advance society and create a new marketplace. And that's what we ultimately want, because I literally would see, if you think about, I started the YWCA in 2013, and if you all follow the markets, you know that we continue to have sort of record highs. Well, not this week, I know it's been kind of all over the place. But outside of that, I never understood as a business person, how can we have record highs in the market, but this industry or this sector was constantly struggling. So there was such a disconnect. So for me, from a business perspective, I would say, what is wrong with our business? What are we doing differently that would allow other businesses to be so successful, but yet our roster is full, our clients are coming to us, so what is it in our business that's not allowing us to participate in a really prosperous marketplace? I mean, we all know that's a good time in our economy for the most part. So what's happening? And then on the financial sustainability side, we have to talk about that we are valuable. Absolutely, we're a nonprofit. Absolutely, we provide social services, but those services are valuable. So it's not enough for us to say that we want to be sustainable. What business? No one would invest in a business that say, you know, we want to be sustainable. I know many of you have backgrounds that have come out of different organizations. If you weren't working for a not-for-profit, many of your organizations would have not had a goal to be sustainable. That's not what they do, right? They grow. And that's what we wanted to do. So we wanted to talk about how can we capture the value we're creating, because my theory was that if the markets were booming, it was because we are actually making sure that people can be employed and can be great consumers, because we're helping them deal with all the stuff in their lives that would keep them from being great employees and great consumers. So our mindset had to shift as well around what we were truly doing in the marketplace. And because Maya would ask the question to our team, if we went away, who would care? So what value do we bring? And it was so fascinating. We actually, and I took this slide out because I didn't want to bore you too much. I'm not already enough to have to pay attention to this. So I didn't want to overbore you, but we literally we put a lot of effort around working with our teams to help them define the value of our services. I used to call it a value chain worksheet, and then we changed it to stakeholder values so that people would feel better about talking about their value literally, but it started with what service we provide, who benefits from that service, who cares if they benefit, or who cares if this person benefits, and why do they care? So for us, every time someone cared was an opportunity for us to create value, and then the question always became, how do we capture that value? Which is typically what a lot of other businesses do. So for us, it was literally translating this business of social services to what an appropriate business model would be given the work that we do. And then finally, the language around not-for-profit, it's only a tax status, and our people probably know that. To me, it's a great tax strategy for us, though, so I don't want to see that change. But at the same time, we really had to focus on that it's not a business model. It's not an operating strategy. It is a tax strategy. And so we really had, and there's clearly rules that define what we can do as a business because of that tax strategy. But when I was looking and continuing doing my research, of course, and I saw that 2%, that philanthropy has stayed consistently 2% of GDP for the last 20 years. Well, it's good because America's GDP is high, so that's a good thing. But at the same time, it's like, well, what does that really look like for us as an organization that we're sort of in a no-growth industry? And what we saw, particularly with charities, a lot of the philanthropic gifts that were being included were really going to hospitals, universities, cultural institutions. Very little that was really going to charities. So for us, we really had to define and redefine where we get resources from, and it couldn't just be relying on this beautiful 501c3 status to automatically get us resources. So we really had to shift our mindset around what we were doing as a business. So I mentioned if we are creating value with our programs and services, what does that look like? So what we did is to really be able to tell a more connected story around what the work that we were actually doing and really how we created value in the marketplace. We put together what we call her empowered journey. And again, it's sort of the hierarchy of needs, but we were like, we can't use a pyramid because we don't want just a few people at the pyramid. We actually want everyone sort of being on this journey and recognizing that people come in and out of this journey at different times in their lives. Quite honestly, for the YWCA, we have women that are episodically challenged, and so we need to be there for them when they need us, not necessarily someone that's been consistently challenged throughout their lives. That's a different model than what we do from our work perspective. So it starts in food and shelter. I mentioned safety and wellness is one of our core empowerment priorities. Education and training, understanding what we do there, as well as economic sustainability. And a key piece, which I know you all firmly believe in, is this reciprocity piece. How do we continue to support people as they get empowered? How do we keep those people in our network? And empower women. And so that's the reciprocity piece. We didn't want to leave anybody out. And then this chart is a horrible chart to read, but just wanted to show you how we took our services and really aligned all of those individual services to that framework to be able to really speak to why is it that we could be the largest provider of sexual assault services in the state of Illinois and at the same time be a small business development center on the south side of Chicago. The reason is because we recognize that people have sort of this journey aspect, and if we can treat the trauma as well as provide them access to educational opportunities and resources, as well as connect them to employment opportunities and small business development opportunity, we could really become a one-stop shop and really create better customer service, quite honestly. And so this was the way we were able to tie all of those things together that would, on the surface, be seemingly disparate. Many people talk about scope creep. For us, there is no such thing as scope creep. We really do want people to come in if they're challenged in certain areas or need additional resources to come to us and really figure out how we can help them and really keep them engaged with us through their entire life. One of the things that we do, and that's why we added that reciprocity piece. We're like, oh, you're great. Let's keep you in our circle, right? I think about one of our child care providers that we work with and support her on the business side. And she was with us when she was a small home-based child care provider. Now she has 2 centers and has been working with the YWCA for 14 years, right? So those are the type of things that we want to see. We want to really empower women throughout their entire life for as long as we can. And one of the things that we've done and spent a lot of time doing is rethinking our services. I love the tummy, the little carrot-looking sign in the middle, I think is the such a good example of how we've shifted our thinking around our services. So we've done that tummy program for 40 years, And what the program itself is, or the service I like to say, is that we provide nutrition education and subsidies to child care providers so that they can get subsidies to feeding kids healthy and nutritious meals. Great program. It does two things. If kids eat better, they're more engaged in education. That's great. And as well, they learn to have better eating habits over the years. So it actually started off as a obesity program for the USDA. Well, when I first came in, Tummy was called our Child and Adult Care Food Program, and that's what it was called, the food program. So it was great. The USDA funded that program. We were consistently seeing the same number of clients in that program and just working that through. And then we had, like, I started in March of 2013. By August, we had sort of this overall program review because I wanted to hear what were we doing in each program. So everyone had to present everything that they were doing in each program. I learned about this marvelous work that we were doing. I'm like, why do we call it the food program, first of all? And if you go to our website, it was a little link that said the food program. Actually, it said Child and Adult Care Food Program. And if you click the link to the program, there was a worksheet that you filled out to qualify for the program. No one could ever tell that it was a nutrition education program. No one could ever tell that it had been in business for over 40 years. No, you couldn't tell anything about the program. So I was like, first of all, let's change the program, let's give it a brand, let's talk about what it is that it does. So we went with Tummy, yummy for your tummy, so we went with Tummy, and called it Nutrition Education Program. And then all of a sudden we could get funding from General Mills and ConAgra. But under the way we approached it before, it was a Child and Adult Care Food Program. We only got USDA funding, and that was it. So we really had to rethink how we could leverage the existing assets of the organization, rebrand them, talk about them differently, really figure out how do we create value, and then allow the programs to do that. And then Tiny Boots, one of my favorite programs. We work with, again, building off the current assets we had, we literally work with over 2,000 child care providers throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. And I should have said this before, we're metropolitan Chicago, and we operate in every county, including the collar counties, and so we have 9 sites across the area. And so in DuPage, we are the Child Care Resource and Referral Center out there. And so we have thousands of child care providers that are in our little Rolodex. And when we were talking to folks that at the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs, we learned that sort of the face of veterans have evolved over the years, and that they are seeing more women veterans and also seeing younger children that have veterans as parents. And so when folks would miss appointments, they learned that it was for lack of child care. So we partner with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and now veterans can receive free child care when they are going to their health appointments or seeking employment opportunities. And I have to give it to the Department of Veterans Affairs. They're the ones who drew those adorable little tiny military boots there that I cannot stop looking at. I think they're so cute. And so, but we came up with the name Tiny Boots. They drew the boots. And so, but that's in partnership with the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs, and actually the first of its kind in the country. And I think Terry Duckworth is actually looking at extending that for more veterans as well. So we're so proud to have had the opportunity to do that in Chicago. The last thing I'll point out here is then the upper left-hand corner, that little women, it's WOMN, in that horrible green little ticker language. But my colleague Jill O'Donovan in the back helped us establish an exchange-traded fund for women's empowerment on the New York Stock Exchange. And so when I say that we're doing things quite differently, we are literally looking at every tool and lever that we have as an organization to think about our business, one, as a business, because we are, and we just have tax status, so a 501c3, but really think about what are the types of resources that we can leverage to sustain the work and grow our impact and do our work differently. The last thing I'll point to is safety at the bottom down here. Again, we're the largest provider of sexual assault support services, meaning we are first responders. We operate the rape crisis lines. We do ongoing counseling. We do education in schools, everything from good touch, bad touch, to dating violence, so the full spectrum, and actually operate on college campuses as well. So we've been doing this work. It's sexual violence support services. Again, nothing you can talk about, but when we change the name to safety, now we're providing these safety services, creating safe and healthy workplaces into employers. And we actually have a partner with 1871, a partnership with 1871, as we know, is the tech incubator here, to provide our safety services to every single business and partner in that in their membership. And so again, just leveraging what we've always done and just think about it differently and really asking ourselves the question, how do we provide value? Who benefits from this? How can we benefit more people by doing things differently? So we're just thrilled to be able to, you know, one thing is Tim mentioned the article that Cranes did. One thing I was really proud of that I'm glad they picked up, I'm like, they could either make me look super crazy or halfway that I know what I'm doing, right? And one of the things that they picked up on and what I was really proud of is that it is about leveraging our 140-year-old history and creating a better organization. It was never about throwing out the old and starting something new, even though they say we manage it like a startup. We are a 140-year-old startup, so try that one. We're doing something, we're recognizing that there's an opportunity for us to do things differently, but leverage all the existing assets that we had. We actually, when I came in, we didn't do downsizing or closing or any of those things that typically to start fresh. We had amazing assets, amazing people. We just needed to approach the work a lot differently. One of the things I mentioned is this partnership model and really thinking about how we can partner with companies differently and businesses and organizations differently. So it's hard to read on this, but we developed this model really telling sort of the marketplace that we want to engage. Yes, we're a 501c3. We want to engage in a different way. And so we talk about our model as philanthropy. So of course we want you to invest in us to support our work. Cost marketing, we're so proud of the fact that we actually do partner with companies to promote their products, but also companies that are very much aligned with our mission. So when we develop our Y Shop, which is our e-commerce, our e-boutique, we like to call it, it's with companies that, small companies primarily, that share our values and so choose to give proceeds back to the YWCA, and that's actually has been a very strong suit of ours. We talk about business integration. What do businesses need? How can we support their business objectives? One of the things that we did as well, we created a partnership with Uber where we recruited women drivers, and we actually became a child care referral service for drivers as well. So if you're an Uber driver, you go on the app, you'll see the YWCA Chicago as a child care referral partner should a driver need child care. And they credit this to us. We never said this, but Chicago is the largest marketplace, has the largest percentage of women drivers at about 30% than any other. And they really leveraged that and pushed our partnership out significantly. And so we're proud of the fact that we've seen that type of economic impact for women in Chicago. And then finally on the employment enhancement, we love our volunteers, and we see that as an opportunity to really engage skill-based volunteers, which I know is what you all do. And that has been such a key part of helping us move the needle on a lot of the work. When I mentioned the exchange-traded fund, we're still in the social service space, right? We're in human services, so we got a group of volunteers to help us assess what the product is, understand how we need to be part of the distribution process and what that looks like, understand how we engage companies. So we continue to create opportunities to engage with people that have knowledge and expertise to really supplement how our organization and what we need to do and what that looks like. So having said that, I just put a couple of these partnership highlights in there, and I discussed that what we've done with Uber. So new companies, old companies, or other companies that are more established. We work with Ulta Beauty here in Chicago, do a number of things with them, from everything. They actually let us use their in-store salon mock-up as the state of Illinois required estheticians and cosmetologists to have domestic violence awareness training. We actually were able to create videos for our trainings using their salons. So that's a different example. Most folks wouldn't think of that as the first thing you'd ask Ulta Beauty for, but that's the first thing we ask them for, because we know we don't have enough trainers to put everyone out in the field, but how can we leverage technology to provide video-based training, and that was how we did it. And so I say all this to say we've done a lot, but we've done it in partnership with our people. I call that our heads shot because I just recognized what a diverse team we had, and so we had a photographer in that day. I'm like, you need to take a picture of all of our heads. And so a single head shot we don't have, but a head shot we have. But our people really make a difference. And the work that we did around our people is one of the most things actually one of the things I'm most proud of. It's interesting because, as I said, everyone has value, and our people are so important to us. We didn't have significant people processes before, so to the degree that we are 140 years old. When I first started, we had 120 people. Now we have 175 people, 171 people. We'd had people that process payroll, but no real focus on having true HR development, leadership recruitment, all of those type of functions. And I hired our first head of HR, which we named our Chief Possibility Officer, because her role is to unleash the purpose and potential and possibility for our employees. And when I met with her, and I said, I'd love you to come in. I love what you're doing. She did some consulting work for us. And she's like, Dorri, you realize I'm 70. I'm like, yeah. I mean, that means you just have much more experience that we need around here. So we just have a great group of people. She actually just retired at 75, and now we've hired her back as a consultant. So I'm like, you really were smart on doing that. So, but the people part of this had to be part of the equation and really made a difference to us as well. The other piece that matters, not only people, marketing matters a lot. I mentioned that we were launching this exchange-traded fund. Terry had mentioned that we saw our big billboard that said, it doesn't work without the W, our attempt to differentiate us from the YMCA. Well, our ticker for the Women's Empowerment Exchange-Traded Fund is WOMN, WOMN, and we have been fortunate to work with another local Chicago firm, BSA Partners, and we're actually getting the Times Person of the Year cover wrap with our talking about our ETF. And so, again, from a nonprofit perspective, we didn't market because nonprofits don't market in the same way that other organizations market. But if people want to know about our work and we want people to understand what we do, we have to also leverage the same marketing channels that everyone else does. And so this became important to us. We don't have $1 million budgets like a lot of organizations, but we really did have to focus on how do we get the message out about our work and what does that look like for us. So hopefully you all will see that on the December issue of Time. And then lastly, so I talked about all we've done, but does it matter? Absolutely it does. So I wanted to give you an idea of what we've seen happen from an impact perspective. So I mentioned our rate crisis calls. We've been able to handle and increase our capacity there. So we're handling about 3,700 calls a year. Our tech girls, again, from a deep engagement standpoint, our girls it's not very transactional, so our girls are with us for 41 weeks of the year, and they tend to be with us for, depending on when they come into the program, for multiple years. And we continue to see our girls show that confidence, increased confidence around STEM. Actually, we do STEAM because we include art subjects. Our economic empowerment statistics have continued to increase and really see women engaged from that perspective. But then also, I mentioned our staff. When I first got there, our staff were leaving. I mean, 40% was our turnover rate. Now we're at 14.6. Just imagine what you do when you pay people more. That helps too. So, well, more relative to what they were making. They're still not, you know, competing with investment bankers or anything, but definitely more than what they were making before. And then our budget has grown from 10 million to 23 million over the last 5 years as well. So say all that to say that it absolutely, from a journey perspective, has been a journey. It has taken a lot of work, and we're still working on it every day because we're not done with our mission yet, so we will be working on it for as long as we need to. But I really thank you for the opportunity to sort of share our story, and happy to take any questions. I see some hands.
Dorri, going from that $10 to $23 million, how has your funding grown since then, and where does it come from?
Sure. So we are, you know, when I first started, so 10 million, we were like 78% was government funding. And for us, you don't hear a lot of nonprofits say this a lot, but actually, I keep reminding people that General Dynamics is funded by the government. You know, they do it in the form of checks and things, but it's good money if you're doing what you need to do. So what we wanted to do was diversify our government funding, and so that we weren't just sort of truly vulnerable to all the different times and administrations. And so now we're at about 68%, And but we've grown in that space. So we actually have grown to get there. We were 30% year over year. And so we've increased our government contracts, but that's been more diversified. So we're getting money from the SBA, the USDA I mentioned, Health and Human Services. So we're getting money from the Department of Justice. So we're getting money from a lot of different places there. And then on the other part of the other 32%, it's different foundations, and so contribution revenue as well as earned revenue, or which I think that's such a funny title for a fee-for-service. We earn every bit of it, right? But the fee-for-service, that type of revenue has also grown. So every bucket, contribution revenue has grown. So literally we've seen in line a proportionate increase across every funding source that we have.
Can you speak of the transformation of the culture and the challenges you encounter?
Sure. You know, when I first got there, the culture transformation was huge, because if you think about when I was coming in, we were, as you saw from the chart, the organization itself was experiencing a lot, sort of a down economy, never really recovering from the recession, quite honestly. And then on top of that, we were having a CEO change, and so there was a lot going on. So the culture and the morale was pretty low. And then I come in talking about, oh, we're going to run this thing like a business, and so people are like, oh, she's corporate. And so that was sort of a dirty word, quite honestly, because if you went, in particular, if you went to work for a nonprofit, there was a reason you didn't want to work for corporate America, right? And so any notion that we were going to do things like a business was not well accepted. And so part of that 40% turnover that we were experiencing before were people that were just not aligned to how we were seeing things. And it weren't that we were abandoning our work, but there was some misalignment that's not what they wanted to work for. I literally, when I had to transition a person pretty senior in our organization, which I thought I did with such dignity and grace, until she sent all staff an email, said, good luck with your social enterprise. And I'm like, okay, I see how you feel. But having said that, we did have to make a significant investment for us to bring on folks like our Chief Possibility Officer to engage people in that process as well, because we could only be as good as our people allowed us to be.